Listen up. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast belong solely to the podcast participants, and not to any participant's employer, organization, committee, or other group or individual. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. You know, for fun. So lighten up and enjoy. Stomping Jen.
Sawtooth Frank.
How are you doing?
I'm okay.
It's good to see you over there.
It was good to see you over there.
You're supposed to say it's good to be seen. That's what witty people say.
I'm not witty.
Now you're witty in your own way.
Oh, thanks.
We have a guest on the show.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know who that guest is?
Mm-hmm.
Who is it?
Joshua Michael Stewart.
Yeah. He's our friend, and he is also the author of the 2022 collection of poems, Love Something. And he's adding that to his many other full-length collections of poetry, including Break Every String and The Bastard Children of Dharma Bums. Josh, his work has been in Massachusetts Review, Brilliant Corners, and Rattle, just to name a few places.
Cool.
So he's a published poet.
Yes.
Right? A real poet.
Yes. He's a poet and he knows it.
Yes, he does know it.
Yes.
Hopefully when we talk to him in a minute, he's not going to be surprised by that. So, yeah, I'm excited to talk to Josh. This is probably like his umpteenth time appearing on the show, and he's always got something new and interesting to offer.
Absolutely.
Because he's not a new person, but he's an interesting person.
That's right.
Right? So, but he does have new things to say, usually.
Yes.
Okay? Otherwise, we would just play his previous appearances.
Yeah.
Why would we do that?
No, we have to keep it current and timely.
But he's here, so
let's go talk to him.
Let's play the intro music, and we'll chat with him on the other side of that. What do you think?
That sounds great.
All right, here we go. Soft Serve Podcast. Creamy, delicious ideas without the creepy truck. Stomping Jen. We're at it again. Doing our thing. Called the Soft Serve Podcast. What are you laughing at?
I don't know.
There?
You have this little grin on your face.
Huh? Of course. I always have a grin. An impish smile, as they like to say. I just get excited to talk to you.
Me?
Yeah, something happens. We turn on these microphones and I become a little child in a candy store. And you're my candy. Get over here. Let me lick you.
Okay, that's enough.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Josh. Sorry for that that intro. I apologize.
That is fine. That's quite similar to many of your other intros.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, but
our reputation precedes us.
Yeah, it's really good to see you. Thanks for joining us and coming to talk to us again. How have you been?
I have been good. I'm just doing my thing. Thank you for having me yet again.
Always.
Yeah, of course. And part of that thing is getting out there, talking about your new collection of poems, Love Something.
Yes.
Yeah. So I wanted to start maybe before I start hammering you with questions about the book and poetry and all of that stuff. If you wanted to read a poem for us ahead of time, I had been perusing through the collection, and I let you know that there were 3 that I was interested in hearing you read. So I sent those ahead of time, and I was thinking we could start maybe with Quills. If you're interested in reading that one.
Yes, sure.
Okay, cool.
Okay, this is Quills, and this was originally published in the Massachusetts Review. So here it is. Quills. Today, a man pressed a pillow over his 7-month-old son's face, then strangled the baby's mother who was also his 16-year-old daughter. He called his mother, confessed, then drove out into the woods and shot himself in the cab of his pickup. A porcupine waddles through a field not far from my house. I've never fired a round at anything not glass or tin. But the summer after my mother loaded me on a plane to go live with my father, I spent nailing earthworms to 2x4s leaned along the backyard fence. Thwacks echoed off the shed as morning haze ghosted through surrounding pines. The worms writhed as I pierced their skin. Blood and shit smeared the boards. The crucified bodies dried and curled under the sun my parents both shared. The pain we receive, the little it takes to give it tenfold. I won't measure evil out of units of illness and despair. But while the porcupine munches on clover, I'll rest on a stone wall, allow the sun to burn my neck red, my hands finally at peace in my lap.
Ooh,
a nice
intro.
Nice to start off with.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's intense.
A lot to unpack there.
Well, I picked it because it was intense, right? And I think it is emblematic of some of your poetry, not all of it, where there's this balance between brutality and beauty, right? And as I heard you read that, I picked up something that I don't think I got on the page when I was reading it, and it was kind of the presence of the porcupine through the different sections of the poem. And I'm like thinking, and I'm not asking you to confirm this, like I'm thinking in my mind about what that might represent as I hear you read it. And for me, like what I'm pulling out of that is it's like I was talking about just a second ago, like this duality between beauty and brutality. Like the porcupine is this incredibly beautiful little creature that, you know, likes to go about its business, but when it gets its ass up against the wall, right, it can be incredibly brutal and cause a lot of damage. And I love how the different elements of piercing like flow through the different parts of the poem. I'm still processing it, even after reading it a couple of times now and hearing you read it. I'm pulling different things out of it, which I think is pretty amazing for me. I don't know. What are your reactions to it, Jen?
What, like you said?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not good at analysis on the fly.
No, it's okay. I'm just, yeah. So, I don't know. I'm not asking you to respond to any of my thoughts about it. So I don't know, but if you wanted to, you could.
Well, I when I wrote it, I can't say I really thought about, you know, the porcupine and all the piercing and everything. Maybe on a subconscious level it was there because, right, you also got the piercing of the worms. Yeah. So that's part of it. Way it was constructed was, first of all, that whole beginning part, unfortunately, that's not fiction. That's something that actually happened in Connecticut, like right over the border from here. And so I either heard that on the radio, like NPR, or read it somewhere. I must have read it somewhere. And so that was on my brain. I mean, how could it not be after you hear it? Especially you would never think of that type of thing happening so close to home. You know, that happens somewhere else. And of course, I do my daily walks at the Quabbin. And that same day when I was there, actually around the time I wrote this, there was this one porcupine that was hanging out at the Quabbin. And he was like clockwork, like the same time every day he came waddling out. And, you know, I would kind of almost hang out with him. So I had these two juxtapositions, this horrible thing and this peace and tranquility with this little creature on my little nature walk. And it was that juxtaposition that I was attracted to, and thinking, well, how do I marry these two? And in my first version of it, it failed. Actually, the poem didn't really work. And because that's all I had was those two components. And then I showed the poem to my mentor, Ellen Doré Watson, and she was like, nope, not working. And she was the one who said, you need to put yourself into this. I mean, I was in it before as, seeing the porcupine, but there was no other depth to it. And of course, I'm like, how the hell do I connect myself, especially to the first part, to this guy who, killed his kids and his daughter, who he also impregnated? How do I even relate to that guy?
Yeah.
And then that kind of where the line was like, well, I never used a gun on anything other than, shooting tin cans. And just mulling over it over and over again. This is where, the art of revision comes in, of trying to find that way of getting into the poem. Somehow, I got into, which is a trope of mine, is going back to my childhood and to, my parents' divorce. And that's how all that came about. And again, thinking about, how that occurred. And there was that summer when I first moved in with my dad, where I was, hanging out in the backyard and basically torturing worms. And, so that I made that connection. And I was also thinking about, going back to the original image of that man. As I get older, when I was, especially as a kid, and I still do, I have a huge problem with, what they call black and white thinking.
Yeah.
Things are either all good or all bad. And as I get older, I'm seeing more of the gray. And, when you think of that story of that man, your first reaction is, wow, what a monster that guy must have been.
Yeah.
Which, which is right. Anyone would say that, but what the hell, what drove him to all of that?
Yeah, the act, right? Yeah, the act is clearly monstrous, right? Like, and like you just said, it begs that question, like, what drove the person to do those things? Yeah.
Right. And so it's, that's where I kind of go to that, what despair or what illness was in him. It doesn't justify anything, of course, but it's, that's where that part in the poem where I'm like, I won't judge of what's going on, because who knows what else, what despair and what illness, lies underneath.
Yeah. Did the act oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go. So I was just saying that's where that part of the poem came from.
Yeah. Thank you for that explanation. It's really interesting to hear how artists arrive at their art. And I really enjoyed hearing that. I'm curious too, you mentioned your childhood, and some of the pain associated with that, like your parents' divorce is a quarry you go to kind of mine. I'm wondering, does a poem like this, and when your mentor encourages you, to connect to yourself, do you find something new in that quarry? like, did you pull out something new and process something new for yourself? Like the stuff about the worms, for example. Had you thought about that? Are you thinking about that in a new way because of writing this poem?
I don't know. I mean, I guess the what I find is, I'll write a poem about my childhood and about that time in my life, and I'm like, I'm done with that. I wrote that poem. I'm done. I won't have to visit that ever again. And maybe in the next poem I won't, but 2-3 poems down the line, I'm back there exploring that time period. Do I ever really discover anything or learn anything? I'm not sure. I mean, with this specific poem, I did think of like, oh, maybe there was more than just boredom why I was torturing these worms. Who knows? What I find most interesting about that is how it just, when I think I'm done with it, it rears its head again.
Yeah, it's a beautiful poem, and again, like I said, I love the balance, between the brutality and the beautiful images in it. I'm curious, did that porcupine stop showing up at some point, or did you stop going to that spot? Like, do you know it? Did it just not show up one day?
Well, I probably switched locations. But then when I think I went back to that location after a time period, he wasn't around anymore. So who knows?
Yeah, he probably moved on because he's like, hey, that guy that I keep seeing is not here anymore. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to come here any longer. That's so interesting. Yeah. I wonder what that porcupine was doing.
Eating?
Probably.
Yeah, he was eating clove. He was chewing on the grass, and it was surprising. Like, not like I went to try to pet him or anything, but I mean, I got pretty close to him, and he could care less, could not care less if I was there or not. He seemed to be in his own little world, just waddling around. Yeah,
and he's got something for you in case you get too close too. So,
right.
Do they launch those?
No, they don't.
Needles?
They don't shoot out of their bodies, but if they get barbed by one, it will release from the body.
Okay.
Yeah.
They can release them.
Yeah, I used to have a neighbor who lived by my dad, and the guy was an asshole. He would let his dog run around without a leash, and every once in a while, the dog would come out of the woods, and its face would be covered in porcupine quills.
My God, you figure it would learn. You figure a dog would learn after the first time.
No,
dumb.
No, and it had long floppy ears, and it would have quills going right through the ears.
Those hound dogs, they can't help themselves, I think.
Yeah.
Yep. So how did this collection, Love Something, come to be? Like, I mean, I imagine you're always writing, right, as a poet and a writer. But at some point, you say to yourself, I would think, I've got a collection of stuff here, and I want to do something with it, put it into a collection. Do you remember when that started to materialize for Love Something?
Yeah, actually, it started before I even finished Break Every String. So, I started this in 2016. And the reason why I started this book was because, my first book, Break Every String, was, it's more or less a memoir in verse. It's specifically about my time growing up in Ohio. And the trials and tribulations of that time. And, reading through Break Every String, I'm like, well, this is a downer. And I was like, my next book, I want to be more uplifting. And of course, I guess Quills isn't the best example of that. But so I wanted this book to be about things I enjoy, about praise, about gratitude. And that's how it came to be. And so, over the years, it slowly formed itself into what it is. Books like these, or at least for me, if I set out to be like, okay, I'm going to write this book, it's going to begin this way, and it's going to have these specific poems in this specific order and end this way, I would completely fail. I would have had to focus on, as time goes on, I'm like, oh, this poem fits that theme, this poem fits this theme. And actually, when I had my first manuscript of this, the book is 80 pages. When I originally had it, it was over 150 pages.
Oh my goodness.
And that was, the first batch. And then, I met with my two mentors, Ellen DeRay Watson and Diana Gordon, to help me with edits. And of course, they were like, these are stronger poems. So we keep these. This is a weaker poem, so let's cut this one out. Or, this is a good poem, but it doesn't fit the theme, so let's move it. And then the rearranging of poems, and then of course, more revising. And that's how the book came to be.
The title, Love Something, strikes me as a plea or a command to the reader, right?
It is.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about that. Why make that plea to the reader that they need to love something?
Well, that comes in the book. There's a few different series of poems within the book. And again, when I was finished with Break Every String, which that book took me 17 years to write, I was done with it. And then it's like, well, now what? And now it's time to write new poems. And I was so sick of, like, my writing method is I stare at a blank page for about 5 hours straight, come back the next day, stare at for about 5 hours straight. The third day, I write a sentence, and then I delete it. The fourth day, I come, it's a long process for me to get a poem going. And I was like, I'm so sick of staring at a blank page. And, I'm envious of these painters. And actually, again, I was at the Quabbin, and there was a guy, and he was painting, a Quabbin, the Quabbin. He had his little easel. And I'm like, you motherfucker, you just come out and you just look at the Quabbin and you paint it. And it's, not that it doesn't take work, but you got it all like right in front of you. And I'm like, well, as a poet, I wish I had that. I wish I had some sort of structure that I can just follow and it fall through, or, have something to work with. Even a sculptor, you have a stone. And you can, like, even within the virgin rock, you can kind of see, like, the sculptor can kind of see what they're going to make out of it. With a blank page, you don't have that.
Right. So
I was trying to find new ways to write. And I always forget the I forget everyone's name. I'm horrible with names. That's why I have my notes back here. John Cage. So John Cage once said, the best way to pay homage to another artist is through their work. So he wrote a poem called Riding Through Howl, in which he took Allen Ginsberg's Howl and deconstructed it and then put it back together by using, he actually used this computer algorithm to rearrange all the lines to make a new poem. And in his algorithm, all the lines actually spell out Allen Ginsberg's name.
That's interesting.
Yes. So I had an idea of kind of doing the same thing, but different. I didn't use a computer algorithm. What I did was I wanted to pay homage to a writer, so I would collect like 3 or 5 of their books, read their books, and as I read through all of their books, I would highlight words, entire sentences, fragments, and then I would put them in columns. So like all the words, sentences, phrases of book 1 was in column 1, book 2, column 3. And then after I did that, I would take half a line from a poem from book 1, and I would mash it together with half of a line from book 3. And to make a complete new line. And that's like the most basic. Actually, when I would do a line, in reality, I would probably like one line would take from all 3 books, a piece of a line from book 1, a piece of a line from book 2.
So you were collaging poems.
Yes, more or less. Basically, that's what I was doing.
Yeah.
And at that point, I wasn't thinking of a poem. All I was thinking of is writing interesting sentences. And then after I have these sentences built out of all these fragments, then I started rearranging those, seeing what sentences connected, which sentences didn't. So I might have 3 sentences that, thematically connected over here, and I had 6 over here, but then I had nothing in the middle. So then that's when I would do original lines there to connect them, doing more cutting, more splicing. And then that's how I would come up with the poem. And of course, the first time I did this, it just made sense to me that the first one I would make would be for my mentor, Ellen Watson. And the phrase actually "love something" is from one of her poems that I used in that process. In fact, towards the end of the poem I wrote for her, those are the only lines that I didn't mess with. Those are like the last few lines are her lines, because I'm actually quoting her, because I say, "Ellen, you said," and then I use those lines.
Do you talk to the poets who you're creating these homages to and using this process for about it, like before or after? Like, I'm just curious.
After.
Yeah,
after I do. So I did one for James Tate, which of course I couldn't, he already passed by then. But I think everyone else, I personally know off the top of my head, because I did one for Adam Grabowski.
Mm-hmm.
Mary Consul, I did one for, and I know her. Actually, since I've talked so much about it, can I read that poem?
Yeah, absolutely.
Pam Stewart, who is no relation to me. I wrote one for her as well. So again, this is a bit long, but I don't think it'd be too bad. And like I said, all these lines, even though I used Ellen's words, they're all my lines. Except at the end where I say, Ellen, you said, and then that is a direct quote. So anyways, this is homage by way of writing through the works of a mentor for Ellen Dory Watson. My mother never wished for her sons to stop painting the world's moans and glitters. You were a blooming brushstroke to the canvas. Like my brother, I could see the Taj Mahal in the grain of an oak pew. Unlike my brother, I'm no splinter inside the smooth wood. I know my trees. I know your barn boards and the shed moving toward ruin. I know your poems living in my lungs. Because of you, I'll notice every exploded headlight in the endless parking lot. The trouble with the space between us is it's a sadness made beautiful over time. The man who loves my mother's wonderful dark hair is all shallow breath and false teeth. My stepfather says she's a woman with an iron mind standing in an ornery river. Her outbursts are haphazard scattershot, appropriate in a chaotic universe. She says with each passing day, he looks more and more like a rusty earth mover. Bless the brain that never wanted a glamorous job. He eats her leftover donuts and heartache. If she were milk, she'd be sour on his breath. Their ugly intentions grew too big for the skin of their house. They're not allowed to live in the same nursing home. She wants to know if they broke the things they thought they could save. Forgive me if I miss her wild blueberries. I've removed pain by hacking at daylilies unworthy of a place in the body's garden. What are poems if they don't flip the switch from trying to forget to wish to remember? I'm forgetting how to stutter guiltily through life. I'm learning how to belong with clumsy and disobedient crows. I refuse to think about the 138 ladybugs I've killed. My arms are always full of eggshells. You've given me so many dumb and beautiful chickens. I'll remember gentle. You found me a white heap of dough, and tonight I'm cooking to West Coast jazz with no thought of waiting out the big storm alone. Tomorrow promises the catbird's nonsense and forbidden love's sweet birdcage. It doesn't matter who's upstairs holding Polaroids of my nakedness. What I bring to bed is a ticker tape parade. What I bring to bed is a howling in the chimney. I'm just another band geek blaring ode to joy through the car stereo. I must shape a planet in my hands, and I come to this with only 9 good fingers. Ellen, you said, try to push back the tangible. Be properly scared. Be here first. Love something.
I think I heard you read that live somewhere before, and I knew that line was in a poem somewhere. So
yeah,
thank you for reading that. There's just like so many haunting and heartbreaking images in that.
Mm-hmm.
Like the line about the 2 old people not being able to live together in the same nursing home. I don't know why that is especially heartbreaking to me. Because like two people could theoretically grow old together and maybe need to be in some kind of long-term care. And I would imagine maybe
unless they're physically violent towards one another.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's going to be us. Is that why you're feeling this way?
Yeah.
Are you nervous we're going to be in separate nursing homes?
Maybe. I don't know. We better make enough money to have a live-in nurse. Let's get on that. So what was Ellen's reaction to that? Did you read it for her? Did you just send it to her?
Yeah, she was honored by it. I haven't met anyone who, has issues with it. Because, a lot of people will bring up like, well, isn't that plagiarism or something like that? And no, because you can't copyright language.
Right.
It's if you have a line in one poem, and the reason why I would make these columns is because I would always make sure I'm taking half of a line from like book 1 and mashing it with half of a line from like book 3, never mashing the lines from the same book, and when you have two separate thoughts and you're taking half of a thought here and half of a thought here, and you're making a complete new thought, it's a new thought. It's not the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, you run into those same types of criticisms sometimes in the collage art world that Jen here walks in, and it's the same idea about why it really is creating something new.
Right.
Yeah, I love that. So you wanted to love something. You wanted to put together a collection that was more focused on gratitude and love, and it got me wondering, what is love to you, Joshua Michael Stewart? Where do you find it in the world? This big, scary, dark world that we all live in.
Well, wow. That is a big question. I mean, there's, I don't know if it's because I'm a writer or if it's because I'm an introvert that has caused me to be, I don't know where one comes to the other, but I'm very introverted. I'm extremely shy. I'm a recluse for the most part. And I guess I have a hard time expressing love. It's no question, we are friends, but we almost never see each other.
Right.
Even without the pandemic, we don't really see each other. But and Chanel can vouch for this because I've said it to her many times. You two are one of my most favorite people in the world.
Oh, thank you for saying that.
It's honest. And so I guess I always have a hard time expressing that. Maybe that's also why I wrote this book, is because I can think about it slowly, and I can put it down in something that's concrete and express it in a way that I probably couldn't do face to face.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And, I guess what I'm saying is I deeply love my friends, even if I don't see them that much. And I love my family, my dad, and, my mom and my brother who have passed, and, the relationships with them was extremely difficult. But nonetheless, I still love them. And I remember when my mom was when she was in the nursing home and she was in Parkinson's, and she, of course, the way it works, when she finally wanted to actually talk about things that she refused to talk about, she lost her voice and she couldn't talk about them.
Oh, what a terrible irony.
Right, it was. And I, and like, she would try to talk, but it was just mush. And to, get simple words was literally took hours. And I can't remember, because it was constantly shifting back and forth. But at one point it dawned on me that she was saying that, basically she was saying that I'm in the nursing home with Parkinson's because she was an alcoholic, and she believed that the alcoholism is what caused the Parkinson's, caused her to be in the nursing home, caused her to lose her house, and because of that, I didn't love her anymore.
Ugh.
And I understood what she thought about that, but I was like, no. And I was like, there was a lot you did that disappointed me. And I wish you didn't, do the things that you did. I wish you took better care of your health, but no way do I love you any less.
Yeah.
And I remember, and I mentioned this in one of my poems where I had the idea of, I wrote out the alphabet on a piece of paper so she could point to the letters. And of course, because of her Parkinson's, she, instead of pointing to A or B, she would point in the middle of the two. Right. So I'm like, which one is it? But then again, and it took like an hour. And by the time she pointed everything out, she asked, do I deserve this?
Ugh.
And again, she was harping on this idea that her alcoholism caused the Parkinson's, which, for the record, there's actually no proof that alcoholism does cause Parkinson's. Yeah. There have been studies. There's nothing that indicates that. Which again, as I mentioned in that poem, I say, no, it doesn't. The only real connection it is they found that people who have Parkinson's have lower dopamine levels. So be happy, or you may get Parkinson's. And of course, alcohol does deplete your dopamine. Mm-hmm. So maybe in a roundabout way it does cause, but there's no scientific proof saying 100% that it does.
Mm-hmm. When she asked you if she deserved it, did you answer her?
I did. I said no. Because no one deserves that. Especially towards the end. And my mom was always very, very independent. She never allowed anybody to help her with anything. And to see her in her final year, I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But I also said no because it was a fact, or at least a fact to the point that we know that the alcoholism didn't cause it.
Yeah.
So.
And that's a different question, right? Like, did I cause this through my drinking, and do I deserve this? Like, I see those. Right. I see those as like fundamentally different questions.
They are.
Yeah.
To her, I think. To her, maybe not. Yeah, and it was sad too because we don't know how. I mean, she was diagnosed in 2016, but we think she had it years before, and it was because she kept on falling.
Mm.
Um, and we, and of course, because of her alcoholism, everyone assumed, well, yeah, she's falling down drunk. But, now it's like, well, maybe it was a mix of both, it was that, but she was also having the Parkinson's.
It's hard to know.
And of course, she, the last time she went to a doctor, the doctor said, you better quit your drinking or it's going to kill you. So she was like, no more doctors. She never.
Yep, that's the solution.
That's the answer.
Yeah. So she never went to a doctor, and the final straw was she. It was Mother's Day. Of course, I'm at work because I'm always at work, and I'm like, I gotta call Mom and wish her happy Mother's Day. And I call, and she's hammered out of her mind. And this is on a Sunday at 11 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, I think I broke my arm. And I'm like, what do you mean you broke your arm? She's like, I think I fell down. And I'm like, when? And she's like, about 3 days ago. And I'm like, you fell 3 days ago and you think you broke your arm. Did you go to the hospital? I was thinking about it. So I'm like, I'll call you back, Mom. Hung up with her. And of course, she's in Ohio. I'm in Massachusetts. So I have to call the town police in Sandusky. And I'm like, I think my mom broke her arm 3 days ago and I need someone to send. And of course, the cops came and took her away. And that wasn't what actually got her in the nursing home. What got her in the nursing home is when you become an alcoholic and you drink for 20, 30 years and you're drinking. The last time I was at my mother's house, where I stayed with her for a significant time, which was in 2014, she was drinking 15 beers a day and she wasn't even buzzed.
Oh my God.
That's what she drank to be normal.
That's a lot of alcohol.
Right. Well, my brother, when he was at his worst, he was drinking a liter of gin a day.
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh. That's a lot.
No, I know, but it's like, holy shit.
Yeah.
So anyways, when you drink that much for that long, you deplete your B12. When you deplete your B12, it kills your short-term memory. Thus, you get what is called alcohol-induced dementia. And it was because of that, they were able to put her in a nursing home, take away her legal rights of herself. She was, some attorney was appointed to her. But the good news about that is once you stop drinking and your B12 replenishes, your memory comes back. So that's how it's different than regular dementia. So when my mom was her last, she went to the nursing home 2016, she died in 2020. She was completely lucid. It was hard to understand her when she tried to communicate, but once you understood what she was saying, you knew she knew what she was saying.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'm hearing in that, to connect this back to the command, right? To love something, love is often a choice, right? We have to, sometimes we have to make a choice, to choose love over something else, right? I recently went through an experience with my last parent. My father just passed away, and he was for a lot of my life, like a pretty abusive person towards me. And, I made a decision, I think relatively recently, not to talk too much about the forms of that abuse, right? But for a lot of his life, he wasn't a nice guy. And towards the end of his life, like your mother, he found himself in a situation where he couldn't care for himself. And he was a very independent person. And, my siblings and I had to make a choice. We had to choose to be there for him, choose to show him love, and choose to, help him, transition through the death process. So yeah, even I'm sort of thinking about that command to love something even differently now in light of my recent experience.
Right. Because, I mean, there were so many times where I wished, before my mother was in the nursing home, I kind of would fantasize for that day where she would be in a nursing home and I would kind of stick my finger in her face and be like, you deserve this. And I'm walking away and now you get to see my ass go out that door. And I'm sure you probably had, fantasies about that as well.
Many over the years, many.
But then when it came push to shove, I'm like, I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
And, and I always tell this to my clients at work, when they have, when they fight amongst each other or have interactions, I always tell them, be the better man. It's like, somebody did you wrong and you want that revenge. But, you need to be the better man. You want to be the better man.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you came to that same conclusion.
Yeah. Yeah. It's complicated.
Right. Yeah. Well, when you mentioned that your father passed, I sent you that message and I was like, I know your relationship with him was, and I use that word, very complex.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And I always wondered if, cause I know you left home right after high school, how, other than him getting sick and getting, old, how much time did you, interact with him a lot or regularly or no?
I'd say not a lot, but regularly. I, like you said, I always recognized that, for whatever reason, there's part of me that always acknowledged he's my father. I still love him, in spite of all of the abuse over the years. Which continued until relatively recently. I would go to see him, as recently as a few months ago. I'd be sitting there in the room with him. He'd look at my shoes and he'd be like, "What the hell's wrong with those shoes? Why don't you have shoes with laces?" Right. And so I'm at at this point in my life, I was just like, well, because I choose not to wear shoes with laces. Right. But so he's always trying to pick a fight with me. But, I saw him as much as necessary, as little as possible to maintain the relationship and the connection, but if he ever needed anything or ever reached out for help, I was always there for him and would always help him, and that sort of amplified itself in the last couple weeks of his life. He just got himself in a position where, he needed help. And so my brother, my sister and I kind of all came together, rallied kind of around him to assist him because he had no one else really.
Right. And rally amongst each other as well too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There were moments where we kind of looked around, when we were in the hospice situation in his house with him, and we said, we can't even believe we're doing this. Why are we here and doing this? And I still, and I think it goes back, to what we've been talking about in terms of love. Sometimes you just have to make a choice to
have compassion.
To have compassion and choose love and express love in some way.
Take the higher road.
Yeah, in some way. And we didn't have any last moments, I love yous or anything like that. But I think, it was, I don't think it was necessary. I think by us being there, I think we showed that in the end. That's what I'm hoping anyways. Who knows?
Yeah.
Now he's dead. I'll never know. But
I mean, sorry, I don't mean to go down this road, but even when, all the grandchildren, they wanted to go see him.
Yeah.
They also had a complex relationship where, he didn't really have a relationship with the kids.
Yeah. He knew who they were, but other than that, he didn't really know any of them.
Really?
But when they all marched in to see him when he was in his hospital bed, and this was
a day before he died.
This was less than 24 hours before he died. He was really happy to see them. And I would almost say that he was joyful to see them.
No, it was.
Really?
And I said to them afterwards, I went out and talked to them. I said, you guys just did an incredibly important thing. You showed this man love in his last moments, and that's such a big gift to somebody who's dying, who may not have felt a lot of love in their life.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was so proud of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was so proud of them for doing that. They made that choice to love something, to love, right? To connect it back to what we're talking about here. Josh, I wanted to ask you, your book, Love Something, the collection of poems, and I want to remind people, this is available for purchase. Josh, what's the best way to buy it, the book?
I guess the best way to buy the book would be through the Main Street Rag website. It is not available. It is not available on Amazon. You could also get this book or any of my other books through me at www.joshuamichaelstewart.com. Or, you can, there's a way on my website you can reach me. And I also think there are links on my webpage to the Main Street Rag website. And my other two books are available on Amazon.
And we'll have all of the links that Joshua is mentioning in our show notes. So, if you're a podcast listener, if you're coming to us for the first time because you are a fan of Joshua's, go to our show notes and you can find all of the links there. But, purchase this book. You've just heard us. We've spent half an hour connecting a poem that Joshua read, to our lives and thinking about it and deconstructing, meaning from a poem. So these are really works of art with a lot of meaning in them. So I encourage you to buy the book and support Joshua's work. Okay, listeners, please do me a favor.
Buy the book.
Buy the book.
Buy the book.
Do it.
And I put my money where my mouth is. I'm holding up the book for Joshua to see. It's right here. We bought it. So, all right. So what I was going to ask you, Josh, before I got off on a tangent, was I noticed that the book is structured in 3 sections. Do those sections have any particular meaning?
Not really. It's just kind of to break things up. For the reader, each section isn't like its own theme per se. The same theme kind of runs through the whole book. My other book, The Bastard Children of Dharma Bums, the sections of that are more defined. But in this book, there is no. They're just broken up to break up the reading for the reader.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm always searching for meaning, so I was curious. I was curious if it meant anything in particular. What do you find as a writer? I think I might even know this answer now after we've talked. What is the most challenging thing for you to write about? Is there a most challenging thing? Like when you think about, I'm going to write about this particular area, and I really don't want to, but I feel I need to. Like, is there something?
No. I mean, what is difficult for me is always the beginning to get a poem going. And usually, I can't, usually it doesn't work where I'm like, I'm going to write about my childhood. If I thought about writing my childhood, I'd go completely blank and I'd be like, I would swear I never had a childhood because I couldn't remember anything. So thematically, I don't have a problem. It's just always getting something rolling. Once I get something rolling, I go wherever the poem wants to go, and whatever, there's nothing off limits. I don't write love. It's ironically, with this book, I don't write what you would normally call like love poems, like romantic poems.
Like roses are red, violets are blue.
Yeah. Or, I've never even, I don't think I've ever written a poem like that. Or like written to like, a girl or whatever. I've never done that. So.
How important is reading to a live audience to you? I've seen you read a couple of times, and I always get something different out of the poem hearing you read it versus me reading it on the page. So I wanted to get your thoughts on the role that performance and live reading plays in your life as an artist and a poet.
I do readings. To me, it's part of the job. I don't particularly like doing readings, though I'm, for the most part, good at it. It gets the poems out there. What I do like about it actually is the community. We're very lucky to live in the Pioneer Valley. That's, of course, full of artists. The Soft Serve podcast has proved that many times. But I read somewhere that like the Pioneer Valley is second only to New York City to having the most concentrated of professional writers in an area.
That tracks.
And all kinds of writers. You got obviously you got poets, you got novelists, you got tons of children's book writers living in the area. And so there's a huge, rich community of writers, and of course, you go to all the writing, all the reading series, and that's another thing. Almost every night, you could, if I wanted to, I could probably go and do a reading every night. There's always some sort of reading somewhere. And, other than like, your major cities like New York or I don't even think Boston has as many readings as we do. You build this huge community and you see the same people all the time.
It's like your tribe.
And yeah, it is. It's our tribe. So that's what I like. And, and again, it's, you get the poems out to people, other people who would never hear of my work, hear about it at the readings. What is also good, like when you're reading new work, when you're reading it out loud for the first time, you might hear things that you didn't hear when you're sitting at your desk. You might read a line and be like, oh, that doesn't really jive that well. I need to fix that somehow. And again, and also you have poems that surprise you in the sense that, you write a poem and you think it's the shits, and you read it at the poetry reading and it's crickets, and no one seems to be interested in it. And you're like, wow. And then you got other poems that you think are garbage. And, 9 out of 10 times, those are the poems that people come up to you and be like, oh, I love that. That was great. So it's good to do readings to measure, your work and what works and what doesn't.
Will you then go and make adjustments to it? Like if a poem is in an early stage, will you then go and make an adjustment to it based on a reading, like something you've heard based on your own reading or a reaction from the audience? Or
I'm very, I'm not saying because one person makes a suggestion, I'm going to automatically go and change my poem, but I do, consider it, and I'm not above changing my poems. In fact, if I ever made a, collected poems book where I collect, my best poems from the books I've published, they probably will get revised again because, there might be something I see that can be changed. There was a famous poet who said, poems are never finished. They're only abandoned, So, you're always revising poems. They're never finished.
That's so interesting.
So I'm always open for suggestions. And, if, there's the commercial 101 people can't be wrong. So if, enough people say, this line isn't working, then it's, maybe it's a good chance the line's not working. So.
What has writing and putting together Love Something revealed to you? What did you learn from putting together this collection?
What did I learn? I don't know. Do I ever learn anything? What did I learn? Geez. I learned that writing books of poems are a pain in the ass. That's a big thing I learned. I guess I learned that, I really don't know.
And that's okay. I mean, we're still early in the I think, birth of this book to the world, right?
Yeah. I guess, I'm always afraid to turn into that type of poet where you write about one thing and that's all you write about. After I wrote Break Every String, and again, that was a memoir about my time growing up in Ohio and my family life, I was so paranoid, like, is that it? Is that all I have to say? Is that all I'm going to be able to write about? And is my next book just going to be more of that? And of course, a lot of my family is in this book. And I touch in those elements in this book, but it's broader. It goes to more deeper themes. And I guess that's one thing I can say I learned is that I can write about other things and write in other tones. Currently, right now, actually, I've been moving away from poetry or doing a mixed genre. I've actually been trying to write more flash fiction and prose poems. So that's what I've been currently doing. So I'm always looking for new avenues to go down. So to repeat myself, I guess I learned that I can, with this book, I can write other themes and dive in other locations.
I love that. It's something, I don't know. I mean, I've dabbled in different forms of art over the years, and I think it's something I always wonder, like, too, like, can I do something else? Am I capable of doing something else, right? And often it requires a little pushing outside of your comfort zone, right? Like to get there, and it's a little scary at first, like pushing beyond what you thought your boundaries might be. But I think that's wonderful. I can't wait to read more of that flash fiction and prose poems.
The prose poems,
that you're working on.
Hopefully,
well, hopefully they'll come out in a collection or something at some point. Maybe.
Right now, I got actually 2 books going. Oh, I have a book that is like a collection of prose poems, new and old, and more flash fiction. And then I got my another book that's going to be more of my Japanese style poems. So my haikus, my tankas, my haibuns. Both books are probably at least 5 years in the making, but I'm working on both of those at the same time.
I love that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of prose poems. Like in Break Every String, there was only one prose poem, but in Love Something, there's actually quite a few prose poems in here. And I've always been what they call a narrative poet. Most of my poems have story in them.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. Not that I don't have any what they call lyrics, but I don't write those as much. I think in stories. Even in poems, I think in stories.
There's a lot of characters like in your poems. Right. I mean, this is, and hopefully you won't bristle at this comparison. But there's an element, like what Bruce Springsteen brings to songwriting, kind of the very character driven, like down to earth, real like stories. And like, I don't know, I feel just for me, cause I'm a huge Bruce Springsteen fan, like, I don't know, I feel some of that in your work. Right. Like, Right.
Well, and not so much Bruce Springsteen, but probably one of my biggest influences on my writing that isn't even a poet is the folk singer Greg Brown. And a lot of his songs are very character driven. And of course, there's not a poet alive who isn't, didn't become a poet because they couldn't write songs like Bob Dylan. That's part of it. Bob Dylan is the same thing. I mean, all his songs are, character driven and very narrative.
I think this is a good transition to what I wanted to ask you about a little bit. It was just your music is really important in your life. And so I wanted you just to talk a little bit with us about the role that music plays in your life and how important that is to you.
Yeah. Well, what I like to say is poetry is my wife and music is my mistress.
Poetry better watch out.
Well, the thing is, it's my artistic journey has been a long one. I've wanted to be a writer since the age of 6. And, at first I wrote little short stories that usually consisted of me rewriting Sesame Street skits. Then I wanted to be at some point, I wanted to be a playwright, and I would force all my neighborhood friends to be in my play. And then when they refused to be in my play, I said, fuck you guys. And I said, I'm going to become a puppeteer. And there I could write my own plays and act them all out, and I won't need y'all. And then I guess in junior high, I got into music more and more. I wanted to be, back in 1987, I was a huge heavy metal fan. So I wanted to play, electric guitar like all the heavy metal guys. And then I got in high school and someone could play guitar better than me. So I switched to bass. So I became a bass player. And then around sophomore year, I knew him from before, but I really became friends with my best friends, Scott Graves, who was a saxophone player.
Also,
he got me into
a guest on our podcast.
Yes, that's true. Yep. And he got me into jazz, and I saw the movie. It's actually I recommend it. The movie's called Bird. It was actually directed by Clint Eastwood, and it was about the life of Charlie Parker, and it flipped my mind. And I've been an avid jazz fan ever since. Scott and I had a jazz quintet for years. When I went to UMass, and I was a jazz composition major. Whole shitstorm about being a music major in college. I won't go into that. That would take too long. I got frustrated with music. I quit playing. I actually quit playing for 12 years. That's where I went back to actually writing, and I got into poetry. Where I really got into poetry was, I went to UMass Amherst. My best friend Scott went to UMass Lowell. Lowell is where Jack Kerouac is from. Jack Kerouac had a huge connection to jazz, and that's how I got into Jack Kerouac, and how I got into the beats was through jazz, really. And then when I was at UMass, there was a poet, Charles Simic, has a book called Walking the Black Cat. And the only reason why I picked up that book was because the book cover actually looked like a jazz album cover. And of course, Charles Simic is all into surrealistic poetry, which I knew nothing about. And I remember just flipping through that book and reading those poems, and just being, again, just like that movie Bird, completely flipped my mind. And I was like, this is what poetry could be, because at that time I just thought poetry was just the boring old shit that Robert Frost used to write.
Right.
And by the way, I hate Robert Frost.
What do you hate about him?
It just bores me to death. And it's not so much I hate Robert Frost, but I hate what the public school system has done to poetry, because nobody reads poetry anymore. The only people who really read poetry are other poets. Even if you're a nationally known poet, if you sell like 2,000 books, you're doing excellent.
Yeah.
And that's nationally known. And if kids were reading Charles Simic, if kids were reading James Tate, Billy Collins, Mark Doty, Sharon Olds, and so many other contemporary poems when they were in high school, rather than this old dated stuff that they can't relate to, they would be reading more poetry. But anyways, I digress. So I got into poetry. I didn't play for 12 years. And then just one day I was like, oh, I guess I'm ready to get back into it. And my dad had a banjo that he never touched. And because by then I sold all my instruments. And I just started tinkering with this banjo. And then I got into it, and it never left me. Even those 12 years when I wasn't playing, where, people will, when they're trying to sleep, there's that old thing where you count sheep.
Yeah.
I remember on times when I couldn't sleep, again, when those 12 years where I never laid hands on an instrument, I would go through my scales. I would go through my, Aeolian, my Dorian, my Phrygian, my Lydian, my Mixolydian, my Locrian, and go through my blues scales. And so, I thought when I grabbed the instrument, I'm like, it's going to take me years to get back to where I was. And it was like within a week, I knew I was back to right where I was. And of course, then I bought a bass, and now I have I have 2 basses. I have 5 banjos. One's electric banjo, and a ukulele, or a few ukuleles. I have 3 of those. The only thing I don't play is guitar. I just play all the other string instruments, but not guitar.
Are these electric basses or an upright? No, you
no,
don't have
I don't have an upright. I have an acoustic bass guitar, and I have a electric bass guitar.
Okay.
Yeah, and I have an electric banjo, and then all my other banjos are, your resonator. However, with all that said, I haven't actually played in over a year.
But you've been busy composing. In a recent post, I think you said I'm going to quote you. You're in a composing craze, and you put out. I wanted to play a little of this, if I have your permission.
Oh yes.
You put out a piece, and I think it was named in honor of yours truly, me. It's called Brad's UFO, because I'm super into UFOs.
Right.
And I love this. I'm just going to play a little of it so people can hear. And I think you said this is your first quote classical piece that you've composed.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, let me fire this up. Let's see if I can walk and chew gum here at the same time. So we're going to hear a little bit of Josh's Brad's UFO concert band arrangement. And Josh has a SoundCloud account, so you can go there to Joshua Michael Stewart and look at a bunch of other stuff that he's put up there. And all of it's really cool. So I'm going to hit play. Let's see if this works. Turn it down a little bit. I love chimes. I love this. This part's awesome. In my mind, that's the UFO landing to take me away. We'll just let that play in the background a little bit. And I think I saw a screenshot of maybe the composing software you use to put something like this together, and it looks so complex to me. Yeah. But you said you majored in this stuff, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's where I've never been a strong player. And quite honestly, I never, even when I was in a band and we would do gigs, I hated it. Hated it. What I loved is the writing. I loved the composing. And that is my strong suit. I can see a score, and I can see where how the notes relate to one another, and how it relates to the harmonic structure of the piece, and how it moves and how it shifts. That's my strong suit. Which reminds me, I'm going to make you happy.
Oh no.
Because because in a previous episode, you guys were having an argument.
Oh no.
About jazz and jam bands.
Oh, we were.
Okay.
And I'm happy to tell you, Brad, you were right.
Oh no.
Hold on.
No.
Yes, you are right. There is a difference between jam bands and jazz.
Yes.
And the reason why there's a difference is because of the harmonic structure. In jazz, like in a regular jazz piece, it can change. Sometimes it changes keys every 2 bars. So the harmonic structure is constantly changing. Whereas in a jam band, the reason why it sounds monotonous is because it is. Because when those jam bands, what they're doing is they're like, when they're doing all their soloing, 90% of the time they're playing one chord and they don't move from that chord.
Huh.
It's just like A minor for 17 minutes straight. Or they might do what they call a 2-5, which is like a 2 and a 5 and a 2 and a 5 and a 2, which is what you hear in like the Doors, Light My Fire.
Yeah.
Do, 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 do. All it is a 2 and a 5 and a 2 and a 5. And which would be like a D minor to a G7, a D minor to a G7. So harmonically, they don't change. Also, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll go, for 17 minutes, they'll just wail on a blues scale. Whereas like, playing a blues scale in jazz is almost like a death sentence. They do play blues notes and blues scales, but they would never like rely on it. They use like other scales like Mixolydian or, Dorian, the Miles Davis's song, So What, is all based on the Dorian scale. They're using arpeggios. They're using what they call extensions. So basically the reason why jazz is different is because harmonically they're constantly changing, whereas in jam bands, they're usually not. They're usually on one note or one chord, and they just lay on that forever.
And maybe that's why, I think you agree with me, Jen, that some of that music's pretty boring, right? Some of those jam band musics. You don't agree with me?
No, it's all awful.
Okay. All right. So maybe, I think
that's why I don't listen to it.
I think we just heard why. And it's interesting. And like, I think I only know this intuitively, but now that I hear you explain it, it makes sense to me. Like,
right.
I have always found jazz like endlessly interesting. Like,
because it's always shifting.
Like you never know what's around the corner. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's not
right.
entirely predictable. That's what I love about it.
That's why I like Tool.
Yeah.
Well, also too, what a lot of people don't realize is like where if a jam band will play like a blues, right? The blues is based off of your 3 chords, and they come into it in a certain pattern. Whereas jazz cats, they'll play a blues, but in the blues, they'll also throw in what they call substitute chords, which you don't know they're going to do that until it happens. So even in a blues where it's a chord pattern that's repeated over and over again, they'll throw in all these alternative chords. So it's constantly changing.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. Do you see any similarities between composing music and composing poems? Or are those things completely separate for you?
it's completely separate from me because I guess they're two different languages. And whereas, my poems are free verse, and, the compositions are far more structured. If I wrote sonnets, or entirely in sonnets, I might see more of a connection, but not really.
Okay. So before we begin to wind down, Josh, I'm wondering if you could read us one more poem. One of the ones I had picked out was called January Praise.
Okay.
I'd love to hear this, I think mostly because, what are we in? Near the end of October?
Because you want to fast forward to January.
January will be here in 8 weeks, so I thought this would be appropriate to hear this one.
Oh, well, actually, I think this release is really close to January.
Oh, it does, yeah. We're recording this. I forgot. Thank you, Stomping Jen. We're always weeks and weeks ahead. So
I pay attention.
We're recording this in October, but you all will be hearing this very close to January. So maybe that was my subconscious trying to tell me to pick something that would be more apropos to when this releases.
You're not acknowledging that I pay attention.
I just acknowledged it. You pay attention. Mm-hmm. But I was right about the jazz thing, just so you know.
I don't remember what the actual argument.
You live it down.
Yeah, I don't remember what the actual argument was. What was it? Was I saying that jazz was like jam bands?
I think you were, yeah.
Yes, I think so.
Is that my position?
Yeah.
And he was like, "No, it's totally different."
Yep, there it is. All right, I'm going to be quiet, and we're going to let Josh read January Praise.
Okay, so there is a series of poems I call the praise poems. There's January Praise, there's November Praise, and there's another praise. And again, when I was writing this book, I wanted it to be a book of praise, things that I love. I wanted it to be a book of expressing gratitude. And so to do that, I started this series of poems in which I basically would write. What I did was, for the entire month, I would just write down all the things that I'm grateful for. And then I would after that, I would try to make lines and, find the most interesting lines or most interesting things and build a poem out of it. So this is how this one came about. January Praise. Grateful I wasn't the one my mother miscarried. Grateful for being blind in only one eye. For having all my fingers. A homemade explosive never having gone off in my hands. Grateful for coffee soaked into my mustache. For slow breaths and refrigerator hums. For the smell of old books. The sound of the turning page. For the field recordings of Alan Lomax, for blue notes and metal slides across guitar strings. Grateful for presidential term limits, for the goodness that lives within most people, even when goodness won't venture far from its wounded cave. Grateful for Basho and his leaping frog, for turkey treks in the snow, for conversations with people who look nothing like me.
Thank you. I love that poem.
Thank you.
Yeah, again, it's the, I don't know what it is about me, like setting up these almost somehow very qualitatively different feeling images in my mind. Like I love the image of the goodness that most people have. But it's, but a lot of our goodness we carry around wounded, right? And it's hiding, somewhere not too far back in our caves where, it can get out. Right. It can get out, but we're not, enough of us have been wounded enough times where we don't let it all the way out all the time. Like, I love that. I love that image. I've just been thinking about it ever since I read that some time ago. And then I love the simplicity and the beauty of the turkey tracks in the snow. Like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say, Stomping Jen.
What are you trying to say?
You
like the poem.
I'm responding to what I love about this poem.
I think you like the poem.
Yes, I did. Thank you for reading it.
Yes.
So, anything else you wanted to make sure we touched on during this conversation, Josh?
Anything else that Brad was right about that I was wrong about?
I mean, everything. Everything, Jennifer.
Well, I guess I wanna point out that. What are you doing?
Josh is turning around and looking at his gigantic, beautiful cat.
Oh, come here. Yeah, my girl. Do you notice that your mood changes between your episodes where it's just you and Jen, or where you have a guest?
Probably. I'd be really interested in your thoughts.
Yes,
about
I want to hear what you have to say about that.
You are far more negative when it's just you and Jen.
Yeah, I mean,
that tracks.
Yeah, that does track. Jen's like, that's my lived experience. Yeah. I mean,
but I have a theory for that.
Yeah, please.
I think the reason why is because you're comfortable with her and you're willing to be vulnerable with her.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're 100% right. Let me give you this. I mean, I think that's it. I've said this before. I mean, and it's one of the reasons why I'm lucky enough. Number one, I have a spouse who will do this with me, but there's nobody I feel I can be my truly authentic self with more than Jen. Mm-hmm. Right. And unfortunately, that truly authentic self is negative.
It's not all negative.
No, it's not.
No, but, and, with guests, a lot of times, like a lot of guests, I'm meeting for the very first time.
Yeah.
Right. And they're people, I don't know. And I'm trying to like
connect with them.
There's that. And I also have the philosophy, like, when somebody is gracious enough to give their time to us and their mental energy, like I really try to treat them like a guest, like, and, I'm not interested in like going after them or trying to bring them down. And I tend to share a lot less of myself in that because I want it to be about them. Like with you, Josh, we've known you a long time.
I think I've known Josh longer than I've known you.
You have, yeah. And,
Yes.
I feel I can probably be myself a little bit more with you. Like,
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But not that I'm not myself with those other people. It's just like,
it's a different part of you.
It's just like a different part of me.
You compartmentalize more.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
But I think,
yeah, go ahead.
Because I've heard you guys say that like people have either told you or written in that they like they want more episodes of it's just you two.
Yeah.
And I mean, the reason why is because even when you guys bicker with each other, you can clearly hear the love between the two of you.
Aww.
Oh, I love that. Thank you.
It's true. And I think that's why people love to hear it, because you can always hear the love between the two of you, even when you guys are aggravating each other.
Well, that tracks.
Yeah, that tracks. Yeah.
And what I love is when Brad will say something like off the wall or obnoxious or whatever, and Jen, you just completely bypass it. Like,
yeah.
Anyway,
we don't need any of that. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go into something else.
Although sometimes I'll get Jen in a corner and then you'll just hear,
No. What the best part is you can actually hear her eyes burning into you. Yeah. You can actually hear her staring at you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Imagine what it's like sitting in this room with her.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Fun times.
That's the other one. Oh, boy.
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking about that.
Well, as one of our dearest and oldest treasured friends,
yes.
We love to hear it. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Anything that you're working on you wanted to bring up or make sure we hit upon?
No.
Okay.
I'm still working. I'll hit you guys up 5 years from now when I get a new book.
Well, you're welcome anytime.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. I know we've asked you our routine ending questions before, so I'll just leave those off the table and just.
No. You got to ask.
You want them? All right. We'll ask again. Maybe there's new answers. All right. Okay. So, Josh, what are you doing these days for fun? How are you reconnecting with yourself? What do you like to do to just disconnect and be with yourself? You can't say masturbating.
Not a damn thing. No. I'm not good with fun. When I allow myself to have fun, I immediately turn around and be like, you're not working hard enough. You need to get back to work. So fun for me is a minimum. I'm always working. Even when I'm having fun, I'm like, can this be a poem? Can this be a story? But besides that, I do like to take my walks at the Quabbin. I do that almost daily. I don't watch a lot of TV. And usually when I do, I fall asleep within 15 minutes. But because it's October, last year I bought the complete Twilight Zone series.
Oh, nice.
So I've been watching all the old Twilight Zones, and there's this other, I guess I watch it through Discovery Plus, but there's also this show called I can't remember what it's called. Not Unsolved Mysteries, but I can't remember the damn show. But it's like they have like these home videos of actually UFOs, or home videos of these strange things. Strange Evidence, that's what it's called.
Strange Evidence.
Yeah, it's a great show. And then they try to explain what's actually going on in the video, and sometimes they can explain it and sometimes they can't. But I watched that. But that's really about it.
I love it. Yeah. I used to love that stuff. That's what ignited my interest in the paranormal when I was a child. Like, the 70s TV show, In Search Of, that was narrated by, Spock there, Leonard Nimoy. Yeah. Do you remember that show?
I do remember that.
Yeah.
And Ripley's Believe It or Not.
Yes, that one too. Yep. And then in the 80s, Unsolved Mysteries. You mentioned it with Robert Stack. I loved that show.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, that's going to lead us to our last question. And I know you know what it is, so
he's prepared.
You've been probably preparing for this. What have you experienced that you cannot explain?
Well, a couple of months ago, if you asked, I wouldn't have an answer, but now I do. So, this one might have been a month ago now. Like I said, I take my walks at the Quabbin, at the Windsor Dam, which I know some listeners won't know that, but it's a dam, it's a park. And I went there around 8 o'clock in the morning. I do my hour and a half walk, and nothing eventful happened. Sometimes I saw a moose there. I have come face to face with a bear there. porcupines. But that day, nothing. And I was driving home on Route 9, and I turned down what is called Anderson Road. But before I do that, there's this farm and these high weeds. And all of a sudden, maybe 20 feet in front of my car, maybe a little more, this thing came out of the weeds, crossing the roads. And at first, when I first saw it, I was like, oh, that's a coyote. And the only reason why I thought a coyote was because coyotes have crossed in front of my car numerous times. And I'm like, oh wait, that's not a canine. That's a cat.
Oh wow.
And I'm like, oh, bobcat. And then I'm like, why does it have a long tail? Why does it have very short hair? Why does it stand 2 feet tall? Why is it about 3.5 feet long? And then by the time it crossed the road, I realized I was looking at a mountain lion.
Wow.
Man.
And I could not believe it. And you know how like bobcats have what they call that square head?
Yeah.
They have that tufts. Did not have that. Had what is called what I call like a scully skull, where the skin is really tight around the skull. Had those mountain lion ears. The fur was like it was like a reddish brown. And it was short hair. You know, bobcats have like a shaggy coat.
Yeah.
This was short hair. You could see every muscle on it. And like I was freaking out. I was like, I can't believe I just saw a fucking mountain lion. And so I got home and I called the wildlife people, and I'm like, I saw a mountain lion. I'm not lying. I swear to God. and they're like, well, did you take pictures of it? I'm like, no, I was driving. And it's not like it sent me a text the day before being like, hey, John, I'm down at the farm. So can you make sure you got your camera ready? So I'm like, no. And they're like, well, we'll make a note of it. And we'll tell our biologists. And if they want to contact you, they will. Well, they never did. But I was, of course, I told everyone. I was like that guy who got anal probed by the aliens. I'm like, it's real. I swear to God. You know?
Yeah.
And one of my friends heard. So, okay, this is what they know factual. There hasn't been a mountain lion sighting in Massachusetts since 1858.
Oh, wow.
Like a confirmed one?
A confirmed one.
Yeah.
They were exterminated by 1858. However, in 1997, at the Quabbin Reservoir, they found scat that they knew didn't belong to a deer. It didn't belong to a bear or anything. And when they tested the DNA, it came back as mountain lion.
Wow.
So, and you could look this, you can all look this all up online. In 2012, something like that, in that area, a mountain lion was struck and killed on a highway in Connecticut.
Yeah, I do remember that, not too far from here, right?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly where in Connecticut it was, but it could have been, it might have been like Enfield or something like that. Mm-hmm. And they said that mountain lion traveled all the way from South Dakota.
Yeah.
That sounds like baloney to me.
No, they knew it traveled from there.
Oh, they knew it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but I mean, it's weird. Like, why would it travel all that way? But now, the other thing I heard, and this is, those things are facts, but this is what I heard from a friend of mine. Their daughter works for the wildlife agency in Massachusetts. And she was telling her mother that when she first got her job, that they told her, you're going to get a lot of reports of sightings of mountain lions. And they said, unless there are videos or photographs, completely ignore them.
Wow.
Don't even. And she said the reason being is if they come out publicly stating that there is indeed a population of mountain lions in Massachusetts again, a whole shitload of federal laws and regulations go into effect, which they don't have the finances or the manpower to enforce. So it's in their best interest to ignore it.
Interesting.
Not to mention the panic it's going to cause in people. Like recently, I think they wanted to relocate like 10 rattlesnakes to some island in the Quabbin. And like
Rattlesnake Island.
Yeah, and people went crazy.
Right.
The population absolutely went crazy.
Like
everybody
the snakes are gonna
everybody was
swim
against
across
us.
the
Yeah, they were
Quabbin.
afraid the snakes were going to leave the Quabbin and go into their yards and attack their children.
Well, I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure like there is Rattlesnake Island in the Quabbin.
Yeah.
It's called Rattlesnake Island because it is a sanctuary for the eastern rattlesnakes.
Yeah. Could you imagine though what would happen if suburban parents around here found out that there were mountain lions all over the place?
Right. Well, there's that, but it's also what I worry about is all the assholes who are like, I'm going to get my shotgun and get me a mountain lion.
Yeah.
Those are the ones I worry about.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? The thing was when he crossed over, he went into that farm. I mean, you guys have probably driven past it. It's called I can't remember the name of it now, but you see the red barn and all that. It's right as you're coming into where, and I'm like, oh, the mountain lion might be going after cats. And then I'm like, well, they might have small kids. They might have small kids or grandkids. So I ended up calling the lady who owns the farm. Oh, wow. And I'm like, you don't know me. I'm just I live in the same town, but I was like, I just felt obligated to call you and tell you that I saw a mountain lion go into your property. So just be aware. And she actually told me that they actually, it's not a working farm anymore. They just do antiques there. So it wasn't going after any cattle because they don't have any anymore. Mm. But so
mountain lions.
I was just like, I just felt obligated. And all I can say is, unlike you, Brad, I'm not. I don't believe. Well, I know there are UFOs. Whether they're UFOs that have little green men in them, I doubt. I don't buy into Bigfoot or any. I don't board the Loch Ness.
Poor dreams.
Ow! I'm dying. Yeah.
But I know what I saw.
Yeah.
And it was no bobcat and it was no kitty cat. It was, I saw a mountain lion. I mean, and it was broad daylight. It was 9:30 in the morning. I didn't start drinking yet. No.
Wow. Well, thanks.
That's all I can say about it.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that with us. And I don't put it past it being a real possibility, and I sort of buy into the reasons you expressed about authorities not wanting to admit that they might know about a reproducing population here,
Right.
They used to be here. They were all over the fucking place here at one time. There's plenty of food here. We've got way too many deer. Like it all adds up.
Yeah.
It all adds up.
All adds up.
All right. Joshua Michael Stewart. Author, musician, friend, lover sometimes. Thank you for joining us. Thank
you for having me.
Yeah, we really appreciate you taking the time to come on here and chat with us. So thank you so much. Listeners, please support Josh's work by going and buying one or more of his books. Definitely go buy Love Something. You can go to his website, joshuamichaelstewart.com.
Check out all the things.
Yep. We'll put the link in the show notes. The link to his Facebook page is there, his Instagram profile, his Twitter. It's all in there, okay? And you can connect with Joshua at all of those places, okay?
Please do.
And you can also check out our website, softservepodcast.com. You can see some of the episodes we have featured on there. You can learn more about Jen and I, that kind of stuff. Anything else?
We do have a donate button.
We have a donate button. If you want to throw some bucks our ways, that's fine too. But, you
can also just leave us a review.
Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts.
Send us a message.
If
you want to be a guest on our podcast.
You got it. You're covering all the bases.
Please let us know.
Yep.
We'd love to talk to you.
Yeah. And, we've got well over 200 episodes at this point. So if you're just discovering us, you can dig back into our catalog.
You can hear the negative episodes.
Yep. You can hear me be mean to Jen, hear Jen be mean to me, hear us love each other, all of that stuff.
All the stuff.
It's
all the
fun.
stuff.
Okay?
Lighten up and enjoy.
Yep. All right. Well, we're going to go around and say goodbye now in our own, whatever way we all deem fit for ourselves. Let's start with our honored guest, Josh. I'm going to turn it over to you to say goodbye.
Okay. Thanks for having me, and goodbye.
All right. I love it. Stomping Jen.
Adios.
All right. You're back to adios. I love it. I love adios. Okay. Everybody, we do love you, and bye now.
This world of ours, ever growing smaller, must avoid becoming a community of dreadful fear and hate. Those who have freedom will understand also its heavy responsibility. That all who are insensitive to the needs of others will learn charity, and that the sources, scourges of poverty, disease, and ignorance will be made disappear from the earth. And that in the goodness of time, all peoples will come to live together in a peace guaranteed by the binding force of mutual respect and love. I shall never cease to do what little I can to help the world advance along that road.